All right, today we're diving into a really fascinating psychological concept from Alina Chamberlain's She Who Awakens. It's this powerful technique she calls the emotional swing, and it's all about disrupting predictability to deepen attraction in a relationship. So let's break down exactly how it works. And this quote right here, it really just gets to the heart of the matter. Chamberlain's point is that the real killer of long-term attraction isn't conflict or disagreement. It's boredom. It's that feeling when things get a little too predictable and that initial spark, that excitement just starts to fade. The emotional swing is basically positioned as the ultimate antidote to that routine. So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the main problem, the real enemy of attraction. Then we'll define what the emotional swing actually is, break it down into its two key phases, explore the psychology that makes it tick, and wrap up with the fine art of using it with precision. Okay, so first things first, let's set the stage. Why is being predictable such a bad thing? Well, Chamberlain's work suggests that attraction really thrives on a sense of investment. When someone feels like they have you completely figured out, that crucial feeling of active pursuit, what we call the chase, it just starts to fizzle out. And this is the key principle right here. Investment breeds attachment. Think about it. The more mental energy a man invests in you, thinking about you, wondering about you, trying to kind of decode you, the deeper his emotional bond can actually become. This is the fundamental law that the emotional swing is built on. So if predictability is the enemy, what's the solution? Well, this brings us to the core concept, the emotional swing. The book also calls it the roller coaster technique, which, let's be honest, is a pretty perfect name for the kind of dynamic it's designed to create. So here it is, the official definition. It's a technique where you intentionally create a sharp contrast between two states. On one hand, this intense, affirming warmth, and on the other, a sudden, strategic distance. The goal is to trigger a cycle of dopamine and adrenaline, which basically keeps his interest in a state of perpetual, active pursuit. Now let's get practical and break down the very first phase of this technique. This is where you establish what's called the emotional peak, or as Chamberlain puts it, the zenith of affirmation. This entire phase is all about creating an absolute abundance of positive, amazing energy. So how do you actually create this high? The source gives us these key actions. It starts with this idea of surrounding him with an ocean of energy and becoming his source of inspiration. But then it gets more specific. See that point about validating his alpha qualities? That's about affirming his strengths, his competence. And then it suggests you anchor his self-worth to your presence by giving him so many high-frequency positive emotions that he actually starts to unconsciously rely on you for that energy. Okay, so once you've established that incredible high, we get to the part where the swing actually happens. This is phase 2, the pivot. And this is the calculated shift from all that warmth to a strategic distance. And it is, without a doubt, the most critical part of this whole technique. I love this slide because it illustrates the shift in persona so perfectly. You pivot from what the text calls the playful kitten, who's super affectionate and available, to the sophisticated lady. And just look at the contrast. She's described as distinguished, intellectually preoccupied, and, most importantly, slightly out of reach. It's a total shift in your energetic posture. And the process for this is really precise. The key, according to the source, is to make this pivot right at the peak of a positive interaction. Just when the energy is at its best, when you feel most connected, that's when you shift. You become absorbed in your own world, creating what the source calls an emotional vacuum. Now, the text is very clear. This isn't about being cruel. It's a psychological reset, and it's designed to prevent things from getting stagnant. So we've covered the how, but let's talk about why this actually works so well. This brings us to the psychology of what's going on in his mind. It's all about creating something called an open loop. The scientific principle behind this is known as the Zeigarnik effect. And basically, it describes our brain's innate biological need to finish what it starts. You know that feeling when a TV show ends on a huge cliffhanger? It drives you crazy, right? That's because your brain needs to know what happens next. It absolutely craves closure. By withdrawing at the peak of a great interaction, you leave an open loop that his brain feels completely compelled to close. And this open loop creates a really powerful effect. He starts replaying your last conversation, trying to figure out why the mood shifted, why the celebration, as the book calls it, ended. This leads him to start strategizing, thinking about how he can win back that warmth. According to Chamberlain, it's this mental chase that spikes his adrenaline, basically replicating the uncertainty and excitement of the honeymoon phase, and in turn, really deepening his emotional investment. Now, because this technique is described as being so powerful, the source is really clear that it has to be applied with surgical precision. This is not a blunt instrument. It's a finely tuned tool that requires mastering a few very important rules. And this quote is the absolute guiding principle. The line between creating fascinating intrigue and causing genuine insecurity is a very fine one. The whole point is to make him wonder and pursue you, not to make him feel so discouraged that he gives up. It's a delicate balance. So the source lays out 3 crucial principles for mastering this. First is timing. A cold phase that goes on for too long can create insecurity, while a warm phase that never ends just brings you right back to predictability. Second, the foundation has to be authentic. This means your distance, your busyness, it has to come from a genuine, full life of your own, not something you're just faking. And finally, the intended result. The dynamic shifts so you are seen not just as a partner, but as a prize to be perpetually won. And all of this leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to chew on. When the dynamics of influence can be broken down into a science of triggers and responses, is love still purely an art? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.
You can find the electronic version of book She Who Awakens by Alina Chamberlain at wishforlove.org.